Hi everyone, this is Alexander Lim and welcome to another episode of Author Story. Our featured book is the novel Making Love in Spanish, which you can check out by clicking on the Amazon link in the video description below. And as for this episode, I am interviewing the author, Bambina Olivares, who writes under the
Oh,
pseudonym B.
yeah,
Weiser.
that's right.
Okay, so she is a world traveling journalist, columnist, media, and PR specialist and author. So, Bambino, welcome to Author Story. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. So, Bambino, first, I'd like to go over a little bit of your background. How long have you been a journalist?
I really can't remember. I've been doing it almost all my adult life, I suppose,
Okay, okay, all right. And how
for
long
over
have you been?
30 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a bit. So, I'm sure you
hmm
must have had quite a few experiences.
Yes, sure. I mean, I'm not a news journalist, so it's
Mm,
more lifestyle and fashion.
right, right. And how long have you been traveling the world? Have you been traveling the world as long as you've been a journalist?
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, I left, I was raised in the Philippines in
Right,
Manila, and
right.
then I went to school. I studied art history in Paris, so I hadn't been back. I mean, it took me 30 years before I actually definitely, definitively moved back to
Mm,
Manila.
okay, all right, cool. I got that. So let's talk a little bit about the book. What made you decide to write Making Love in Spanish?
Well, I was single after a long marriage, and I started dating, and I was traveling a lot as well.
Mhm.
So, kind of like adventures in dating in a way, and all these little mishaps. And I tend to find humor in everything.
Right, right,
So, one or, a couple of dates that were kind of, funny and or bizarre, I suppose.
right.
And so the germs of the novel had kind of started.
Mm, okay. So, all right. So, for everyone listening, I acknowledge that there's a cat meowing in the background. That is ours. All right. So that's one of the humorous things I guess you can pick up along the way. So, all right. So,
Schrodinger's cat.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The cat. Okay. So I heard that you wrote this out on a dare. Is this correct?
Yeah, something like that. I remember I had been in it was kind of like one of these weird dates, like, oh, we'll meet up, and it was this opera singer or something, and we were
Right,
going to meet up in this club and
right.
whatever. And it was, one of these social things or whatever.
Right.
And I kind of met him. When I met him, he just turned out to be so like homophobic or something, and like
Ah,
kind of really arrogant. And
right.
I was telling a friend that, and she was like, "Why don't you start writing about these things and use that as a takeoff point?"
Mm,
And so that's kind of how it started. And then, I'd been with my mother. I was traveling with my mother in New York. We would
mm,
go often, like once a year
mm.
during the spring,
Right.
and we had hired this driver one time, this limo driver,
Mm,
to take us around, who was very good looking, very young, very good looking, very sweet.
mm,
And my mom said something like, "I think that driver was flirting with you. I could see him looking at you,
mm.
through the mirror."
Right.
And so, and I started, of course, it was kind of, a little bit of a thrill or something because he was cute. But
Okay, okay.
so I started thinking, okay, what if, there are all these, like, when you come from the way I was brought up and everything, there
Right,
are very clear class distinctions in
right,
society, and the notion of going out with someone who was kind of like working class,
right,
would be sort of frowned upon or something, like,
right.
you know, send shockwaves through
Mm,
society, that sort of thing.
right.
So I thought, okay, what if, so I kind of built a whole satire around that.
Hmm. All right. And that's okay, cool. So that's how this came about. So, so Maxine Slater. Let's get on to the character. Well, okay, she's got a British husband, so no surprise in her last name, I suppose. What gave you the idea to make her your main character?
Um, I wanted to represent someone like a well, she was Filipina, or half or whatever you call it, but like a global kind of Filipina who was, you know, who was well traveled,
Right.
spoke several languages and all that, and not necessarily kind of informed by her own upbringing. but not necessarily tied down to it. And
right,
kind of sort of breaking the mold in a way, and also, for people like me who are raised, still probably one of the last generations to be raised, like, to aim for a husband and your life would be complete, sort of
right,
thing.
right,
To
right,
discover that, hey, life goes on even after divorce, and it even gets better. You know what I mean?
mm,
So
right.
yeah,
Okay.
and I
Well,
wanted to portray someone also with a lot of humor, and
mhm,
you know, who doesn't maybe take life too seriously, or
right,
takes life seriously in the moments you're supposed to take it seriously, but also knows how to rise above everything with, a sense of humor.
right, right. Okay, okay, cool. Is she based on anyone you knew, or is she like, a composite character from
Yeah, she
different
would be
people?
more a composite, but I mean, um, some of the experiences were mine. Some of the experiences came from, what friends, from what I'd hear about or whatever,
Right.
and so I kind of like built them all into her, her life.
Hmm. Okay. So, what, if I may ask, what was the most fun part about creating her character or even writing the book for you?
Well, I mean, so since it was fiction, it was, you could go a little crazy even with the
Hmm.
conversation and all that, and also kind of like the whole, pushing the envelope a little bit. I mean, I knew that my audience would be primarily in the Philippines, because Anvil Publishing had you know picked up my book, right?
Right,
Had
right,
wanted to publish it.
right.
So, and they in fact had asked me to, for want of a better word, Philippinize certain elements, which was fine with me.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so a lot of it was really fun, and like weaving more Filipino elements into, or bits of Filipino mentality or culture and all that,
Right.
into the story. And actually, there were all these things that I remember from, when I was younger and I first started dating, or even my, gay friends and all their outrageous stories.
Hmm.
So I was able to like weave them in as well. So that was fun.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, I also have to ask this: what made you decide to use Latinos as the men who are mainly attracted to her?
I mean, in a way, there's this whole stereotype about Latino lovers and all that.
Hmm. Right.
And you have a lot of them kind of in media, the whole, I don't know, like, well, starting with Rudolph Valentino, obviously,
Hmm.
from way, way
Yes.
back, but
Yeah.
but it's kind of like a trope that's endured, right?
Mm.
So, um, you know, um, and obviously there are many types, so it's not all one type, not all swarthy, whatever,
Hmm. Right.
um, smooth, So I just thought, like, I don't know, maybe it was a bit, um, what's the word? I don't know. Maybe it was fun. It was fun
Oh,
to
okay.
do it because, also from my personal experience, they were really quite funny as boyfriends, or
Hmm.
or dates.
Right.
So I just thought, why not,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, sure. Why not? I mean, it's
And
really
like, Spanish is a really expressive language, so I was able to also, weave a lot of Spanish in.
right. Right.
And I guess it also, I wanted to also show that, it's kind of like, we live in a global world
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
And in a way, you can't, like, just as, there are so many Filipino stereotypes that abound, right? So, and that's in the same manner as, like, the same way Maxine didn't want to be tied down to one kind of Filipino stereotype.
Right.
Latinos as well. Like, you couldn't, like, really, you couldn't just say, like I said, like, not all men are, dark, swarthy, swaggering,
Hmm. Right. Right.
that type thing. So you have all kinds as well. So
Mm.
hopefully it humanized them a bit,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely a break from the usual stereotypes. I mean, that definitely helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mambina, was there any part of this book that was, kind of hard for you to write out or kind of hard for you to work on?
Believe it or not, sex scenes. I mean, I had to put quite a few sex scenes,
Hmm.
and they were really difficult to write.
Hmm.
And I mean, because obviously you try to avoid the whole pulp fiction, or whatever, purple language or whatever it is.
Right,
So, but you're trying to kind of depict an act that's full of like desire, arousal, and all that.
right.
But you try to do it as well without being cliched, and that was really hard. And also because it was about a woman's, self-discovery as well through her sexual adventures,
Right.
there kind of had to be some variety.
Yeah.
So just thinking up all those things was really difficult. And in fact, I had one of my really good friends who was kind of one of my first readers. So when she was looking at the draft, she was saying, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Why do you say this? Why do you say like she jumped on him and this? Because when you think about it, it doesn't make sense. Like the
Uh-huh.
choreography is really bad. So I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh, okay, you're right about that. You know.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So it's so you really thought this out. I mean, everything in the end, everything had to make sense, particularly with the sex scenes. I mean, it's not just boom, 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 and there's a
Yeah,
logic to all of
yeah,
this. There's a logic.
yeah. There's a logic to it, and also, I mean, you also kind of struggle with, I was publishing in my own country, so there's also the um, probability that people who knew me, never mind the people who didn't know me, but people who knew me would think, is this really you? Did you do this? Or,
Right, right.
whatever. So, that was also part of it. Yeah, and the other thing that was also really difficult was how not to how to avoid the trap of just erotica.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with erotica, right? But
Right.
I kind of, never thought of myself as whatever, a writer of erotica. Not that
Mhm.
there's anything wrong, but
Yeah.
so it was also trying to bridge that gap. I wanted to write something well
Hmm.
that just happened to have a lot of sexual content.
Right, right. And I mean that's something I also want to ask you about because I mean it is so easy when writing sex scenes or stuff like that you emphasize I know how to call it the titillation factor,
Mm,
make the spectacle rather than something that's logical and in a way that works.
yeah, yeah, that was very challenging.
Yeah, and I guess I guess you kind of pull it off because it
Oh,
does
I
it
don't
does
know.
seem to.
I hope so. But no, and I also wanted to be able to communicate what goes through a person's mind, because sex is not just physical, right? There's a
Mm,
mental component to it. There's an emotional component to it, and
right.
not just the physiological stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to be able to express what goes on, because I there was one scene where Maxine, it was basically her first real date or whatever after separating from her husband,
Right. Right.
and so kind of trying to express the kind of hesitation, like the excitement at the same time, the hesitation, because
Mhm.
it's kind of like a new partner after so long.
Right. Right.
And there are like a million things as well going through her head, and
Right.
and sex can also be comic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you think,
Yeah.
oh, you're like there and it's really hot and all that, and then your head's banging against the wall,
Right.
so
Right.
yeah, I wanted to capture all those things too.
Mhm. Okay. So what sort of research did you do for these for well not just the sex scenes but also for the book itself? Did you
I
like speak with different people or it's just based on as you mentioned earlier the stories that your friends told you?
Yeah, no, no, no. I based it on people, yeah, stories that my friends had told me, and I guess also some urban legends that had been going around from the time I was growing up or whatever.
Right.
But also some research into, there was like a little bit of Alzheimer's there, because I portrayed the father of Maxine as going through, as suffering from Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And then there was something that somebody had told me about the way, oxytocin is released in the body when men and women have sex, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and it's very different for males and different, as it is for women. So I
Right.
I did a little bit of research about that as well, which I found quite interesting.
Okay. And I guess it's a given since you're the writer, but I mean it. the point of view of women when it comes, particularly when it comes to sexual encounters or sexual relationships, it's a lot different compared to how men view it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that's true as well. I actually also wanted to say something. That setting the book, where I was gonna set the book was also a little bit challenging because
Mhm.
it's so easy to think, oh, you know, a divorced woman, you know, becomes single, wants to start dating,
All right.
and so, you know, why didn't you set it in this place or that place or whatever? And but I just felt like, you know, the majority of her adventures take place in New York, and
Hmm.
yeah, I just felt that it was the one place in the world where there was all that possibility, you
Right.
know?
Right. I mean, it would have been different like if it had taken place in London or maybe even, heck, even in Manila.
Yeah, well,
It would have been very
I
different.
think any big city it might have worked, but I was
Hmm.
more familiar with the scene in New York. But you know,
Okay.
yeah, but like also to kind of like have to justify why a single well, divorcee or whatever you want to call it would
Hmm.
kind of have to travel outside, so outside of wherever she was living,
Right.
to um to have these adventures and all that.
Right.
So, you know, I also had to, I mean, it had to make sense because it was kind of part of her evolution as
Right.
well.
And it's interesting for me because I mean there aren't that, let's face it, I mean there are not that many books on women in their 40s, going out on sexual adventures. I mean most of the stuff out there is like people in their teens, in their 20s, they're going wild and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
this is definitely
Yeah.
something different.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to write it from the point of view as well of an older woman. I think also it has to do with maybe the way I was raised. I don't know, maybe in the US, from what I've seen, like, you know, when people go to college in the US, it's their first, you know, the taste of real freedom and,
Right.
you know, whether whatever they want to drink or they want to hook up and all that. Whereas, you know, I came from a much more conservative background. So the idea of sort of, you know, dating around and all, I mean, and dating then when I was growing up really just meant going out to dinner with someone. It
Mm,
didn't connote any kind of, you know, commitment or even physical relationship, maybe apart from a kiss or something.
right.
But dating was the first step. It was, you know, you dated someone before you became boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, it sounds so archaic now,
Right.
but that was the way it was. And so college wasn't, because I went to college at home. So it wasn't really a time of experimentation or going wild or or, you know,
Hmm.
or crazy. So it was just a different environment.
Right.
And so, you know, I wanted to explore also someone doing those things, kind of pushing herself a little bit uh, at a much older age because she has a different sense of herself already. And
Right.
in a way, she knows who she is, right? Instead of being at that stage in your late teens and early 20s where, you know, you're trying to figure out who you are.
Right. Okay, and I guess that brings a different cut into this entire thing. I mean, this is a woman who knows who she is already. I mean, not as you mentioned, not someone who's still figuring things out.
Yeah, and then there's a scene there where I think one of, you know, one of her lovers or whatever tries to slap her on her face or something, and then she just says, "Look, I'm not into that" or something. And you know, you kind of have to be a certain, you know, you have to have reached a certain level of um, ma- I don't know if maturity is the right word, but you have to have a strong sense of self
Mm,
to be able to say that, you know, at such a moment. Because as all these Me Too stories have shown now, all these things that have come to light,
yeah,
that women tend to go along just because they don't know how to say no and they don't know, you know, they think,
yeah,
well, you know, I just have to grin and bear it or something, or, you know, he wants to do it, so okay, I'll try. But, you
right,
know, maybe you don't really want to do it, but you don't have, you know, you don't even think, it doesn't even occur to you that you can say no.
right, right. And that's an interesting point because, all right, this may be a bit of a sidebar, but I find that a bit of an interesting point because um, that seems to be a common thread with most women anyway,
Hmm.
regardless of society, whether it's an open, sexually open or a sexually conservative society.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also the way, you know, women have been socialized
Hmm.
throughout whatever for, you know, centuries.
Hmm. And all right, maybe I'm correct me if I'm going a little bit off the reservation here, but I mean you've traveled around the world, you've spoken to women.
Yes.
In your opinion, what do you think lies beneath this?
Beneath what the
Beneath not being able to say no.
well, a lot of it is really culture and socialization. Like,
Hmm.
it's also the way sex has been framed all this time. That sex exists for the pleasure of men and not women, and women are there to please men.
Hmm.
So women, somehow it's ingrained in them from, from when they're very young, that they're there to please their men
Hmm.
and do what they want, and their own sexual needs, come later. And I think it's always very revolutionary for women, kind of groundbreaking when they realize that, hey, their own pleasure matters too.
Right.
And not everybody even gets to that point.
Hmm.
Even people who are married, they think, oh well, my husband wants to do it again. Okay, okay.
Right.
you know
Right. Right.
I mean, I've heard enough stories and all that. So yeah, it's the way we've been raised all
Hmm.
these years.
Hmm. Okay. All right. All right. Cool. So yeah. I mean, like I said, I just brought that up because I find it interesting that it's a common thread throughout women throughout the world.
Yeah, and for all the openness of some societies, those that mentality also still persists. I think it's changing now, which is good. But it's also like when you look at studies, scientific studies, that if you compare the number of scientific studies that are centered on male, ejaculation and all that stuff, male arousal, male ejaculation, there's so much more than female, than the female orgasm or
Right.
something,
Right.
and like even the whole portrayal of the sex act,
Hmm.
heterosexual sex act, I'm saying,
Yeah.
is that it, even if you look in movies and whatever, how it's portrayed, it ends when the man supposedly comes,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
When the man finishes and not the woman.
Right.
So, it's very male centric.
Hmm. Right. And yeah. So given that, I just given that, did you have any difficulty with the with this entire book, with this entire process of putting things from framing things from a female perspective rather than from a male perspective?
No, no, no. There was no difficulty. I mean, that was
All right.
part of
Okay.
the idea, was to actually,
All right.
take it from a woman's perspective and her own discovery of, herself while she was going through all this.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of asked because I remember one of a popular work of literature. What's this guy? Lady Chatterley's Lover.
Yes, yes,
It's
the D.H. Lawrence,
it's
yeah.
D.H. Lawrence. It because someone once referred to it as the sex acts are actually the heroine is actually a man. In the way it's described and the way it's worked. So yeah, there is that bias.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what they say, right? I mean, a man can't really, well, they say, I don't know if I believe that or not, but a man can't write from a woman's perspective you know, um, as deeply as a woman might.
Mhm. Well, yeah.
It is said, right?
Right, right. Well, and totally understandable. I mean, men and women do think differently. They do operate differently.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. I mean, it's more, I don't know. I mean, I think that emerging research shows that some of these beliefs that we have are myths, right? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
whole thing about men being stronger in science and mathematics and women, being stronger in the humanities and all that.
yeah.
That's, kind of not. I don't think that's true because girls can code too, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so Bambino, we're winding down this interview. So in the last minute or so of this interview, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share, maybe to inspire listeners?
To inspire. I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess, be true to yourself, and
Okay.
I think, I don't know. I don't have any great driving philosophy or whatever in life. I mean,
Right.
As a writer, I do try to find the time to work, and it gets increasingly difficult. And
Mhm.
in fact, I haven't tried to do any fiction, since the book was published, but I've been working on a book of poetry, actually. And in a way, I'm doing it because I'm trying to resist being labeled.
Right. Right.
And it's hard when you write. I mean, you write a book that has a lot of sexual content.
Right.
It,
Right.
so, and that's also partly why I wrote it under pseudonym. But it's not as if I hide,
Hmm.
behind
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, it's given me a platform,
Right.
because I was approached to write a column about sexual politics and all that, which I do. So I have a weekly column as well in a Philippine paper
Mhm.
online.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
But yeah, but really, I don't know. I would say, don't know if I have anything really profound to say, but you know,
Whatever you gotta say, go right ahead.
yeah. I mean, go through life with grace and humor. You
All
know.
right. Well, actually, those are pretty simple words to say, but sometimes doing that is really hard to do.
Well, I don't know. I suppose, but I've always been able to, find the humor. And I mean, obviously, not every situation deserves. You're not supposed to mock every situation, obviously either. But it kind of helps if you're able to laugh at
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. Cool. I got that. Cool. Okay, then. So, in closing, the book is Making Love in Spanish. The author is our guest, Bambina Olivares, also known as Be Wiser, and you can find her book on Amazon. So, Bambina, thank you very much for being an author story. It was very interesting chatting with you.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So, everyone, I invite you to go ahead and check out Making Love in Spanish. And if you want to check out some other interesting authors and books, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. I'll be back next time on our Author Story weekly interviews with another great book and another fantastic author.